Howdy. Just doing a little tidying up here. And welcome. Welcome. Nice to have you back for another question and answer period. And today we've got some great questions, and I will be getting to them soon. I'm going to semi talk about one of the questions today, but I really want to. Hi, Lola. Nice to see you. Happy birthday. Um, I'm mostly going to talk about a topic that's near and dear to most of us, and that Catherine sent out an email about today, or a newsletter. That's what you call those things. Sent out a newsletter. And so I'm going to, in a minute, share my screen. I'm just going to, again, scroll through the newsletter. But before I do that, the title is about weight loss. But weight loss is never just about weight loss. Weight loss is about creating health. If it's about just losing weight, often people will do that in very unhealthy ways. So this is really about health on many, many, many different levels. This is going to be concerning blood pressure, cardiovascular problems, diabetes, blood sugars, weight, etc. And I'm going to cover a lot of ground here in a relatively short period of time. And so please join us or stay with us because I find it fascinating. And I think Catherine did a great job on the newsletter. So what I'm going to do is share the screen with you. Amazing new weight loss treatments. Now, when we say treatments, we're going to talk about some Western treatments that are quite fascinating, some new ideas, but we're also going to talk about some diet issues that make weight loss really simple, not painful at all, and also some supplements that really reinforce that not painful, not difficult idea of weight loss. So I'm going to talk about those more toward the end. So there are two new groups of diabetes drugs. And the one I'm going to talk about today is called GLP-1. Okay, GLP-1. And we'll talk about what that is in a minute. It's a glucagon-like peptide 1. And since it's such a big mouthful, let's just call it GLP-1. Okay, there's some SGLTs also, but we'll talk about those another day. And so obviously, as most of you know, maintaining normal blood sugar has become just an astronomical concern. In the United States, Catherine put here, but it's a huge concern worldwide. When I was doing my diabetes protocol, studying in China, because they completely wrote their diabetes protocol a little over a decade ago, they are way ahead of the United States in terms of treatment. And of course, we do our treatments based more on the Chinese way of treating them, and we get great results. But really, we're looking at this huge prevalence of sugars, carbohydrates. And what I'm going to talk about today is that it's certain types of carbohydrates that are creating most of the problems. And what's equally as much of a problem is that those foods have much lower fiber content. And I know a lot of people think, oh, yeah, I'm getting lots of fiber. Not true for many of them. In the United States, a few years ago, last time I looked, the average fiber intake was 10 to 11 grams a day. The average fiber intake in China was 33 to 35 grams of fiber per day. The average number of bowel movements in the United States at that time was 1 every 3 days. Now, in the Bay Area, we tend to be a little healthier than in the Midwest, but still, when you average it out, it's 1 every 3 days. In China, in rural China, and in most indigenous cultures around the world who are living, with a more natural diet and lifestyle, the average number of bowel movements is 3 a day. So that's 9 times more bowel movements, which translates to 90% less bowel cancer, amongst other things. So this is a huge challenge. Now, I hesitate to put this picture in because then people think, oh, I don't eat donuts and I don't eat waffles, etc. But it goes way, way beyond donuts and waffles. Okay, so these glucagon-like peptides or GLP-1 can be increased through a whole variety of methods. And it's really important that we do that. So diet can do it, exercise can do it. However, there is this new category of drugs. The one that's most talked about is Ozempic, but there are several, there are at least half a dozen drugs in that class. They have been FDA approved for diabetes. However, they are used extensively and are getting FDA approval for also for weight loss. Because if you treat diabetes by lowering insulin requirements, lowering insulin resistance, and really changing the blood sugar levels, well, then you're going to lose weight also. They go together. So there's this new class of type 2 diabetes drugs that improve blood sugar control and then also weight loss. And they mimic the action of this hormone in the body, the glucagon-like peptide, which goes up when you eat. So you get sugar into your system, you get carbohydrates into your system. That stimulates the body to produce more insulin. It also does a few other things. And as we know, lower blood sugar levels are helpful for controlling type 2 diabetes, but it isn't completely clear how the GLP-1 drugs lead to weight loss. There are theories, but it's not completely clear. Certainly one of those is by lowering blood sugars. Another way is that the drugs slow the movement of food from the stomach into the small intestine. As a result, you feel full faster and longer, so you eat less. So, we've got the whole French paradox where they eat all these fatty foods and they don't gain weight. And one of the reasons, there are a couple or a few, but one of those is that they eat very slowly. They'll sit down with friends and eat dinner over a 2-hour period. And we tend to gobble our food down. And one of the problems with eating quickly is you don't give your body enough time to tell you that you've had enough to eat, right? And there are a couple chemicals that will signal you when you have had enough to eat. And if you eat too quickly, they don't have time to signal you. Well, with the GLP-1 drugs, the food is more capable. It causes more of the GLP release, and it signals you that, hey, this food is not moving. It's staying in your stomach for a while, so you feel full, and then you eat less. And that's certainly one of the methodologies. One of the other things is it seems to reduce cravings, probably from that same mechanism, and leads to weight loss, and appetite control seems to be one of the biggies. So it's a super powerful formulation if people can commit to using it once a day in the morning, if you start your day off right, and do the GLP-1 drugs. Now, they do have drawbacks. There are cases where the action of moving the food through the intestines is too slow. Some cases of intestinal blockage from that. So I'm not recommending this drug. I'm just telling you, this is a big mover in the industry, and it really sheds light on some other things that you can do from a natural level. Now, I do have diabetic patients. I have a juvenile onset diabetic patient who has never, ever, she's in her late 30s, has never had good blood sugar control. Hemoglobin A1C always extremely elevated. And she's been doing one of the other GLP-1 drugs that was approved for her through her insurance company, lost over 40 pounds the last time I saw her, and had the best blood sugar control she's ever had. So I think there is a place to use these drugs. However, I think you're much better off, as with most things, going a more natural route. And now we've found a way to make that just as easy as doing the drug. So I'm going to talk a little bit about a few things that can increase GLP-1, as well as a few other ways that you can lose weight and balance blood sugars. So Glucomannan. Glucomannan is a water-soluble dietary fiber derived from konjac root. Konjac Mannon is a little more specific, and that's my favorite fiber for over a decade. Konjac Mannon was written up by Michael Murray, who's a famous naturopath, in a book called Hunger Free Forever, where they put people on 24-hour continuous glucose monitoring. And this was at a time that wasn't done very much. It wasn't as easy as it is now, but they found that the single best fiber, and they tested about 200 fibers to control blood sugars, was this Glucomannan. And so tons of studies on this. And I didn't list any from Murray's book because it's a little older, but in a meta-analysis, and again, as you know, a meta-analysis is generally the highest, most accurate form of analysis because they take multiple studies, put them together. In this case, they took 14 randomized controlled trials. And again, randomized controlled trials are the gold standard in research. And then when you take a meta-analysis on top of that, that's as good as it's going to get. And they found that 2 to about 4 grams a day significantly balanced total blood fats. So again, when we're looking at people that have high triglycerides, high cholesterol, et cetera, not only will the Konjac Mannon help reduce the blood sugars, but it can also help the blood fats. That's pretty wild. In one study, 28-day study, 3.6 grams a day. This was a smaller study, only 22 individuals, but it significantly promoted healthy blood fat and cholesterol profiles. Apolipoprotein B, which is a nasty cholesterol, and before meal blood sugar levels compared to placebo. Amazing. Another review of 7 clinical trials with glucomannan supplementation, and this one was 2 to 4 grams a day again for 8 weeks, found that the supplement significantly reduced body weight. You get this? 3.08 to 5.5 pounds, even without any other dietary restrictions. So think about that for a minute. Lose 5 pounds in 2 months just by adding more fiber to your diet. And there are many ways to take this. I'm going to suggest one, but it's not bad tasting. You can hide it in all kinds of things, and it's a massively health protective supplement. Even at low doses, like 1 gram a day over 8 weeks, they found weight loss of 5.5 pounds in 20 subjects. Okay, now 1 gram a day, that's 1/3 of a teaspoon. That's almost nothing. And even that caused significant weight loss. Okay. Second, another fiber. Fiber is one of the keys here. That's what makes you feel full and satiated, right? As well as partially because of the bulking of it, but also because they help with GLP-1 release. And again, lots of dietary fibers are good for maintaining satiety, but often you need them in too large a serving size. Guar Gum is a little bit different in that you don't need very much of it. So a regular intake of Guar Gum provided significant, sustained post-meal satiation effects and minimized the intrameal calorie intake by about 20% in normal subjects. So you eat dinner, an hour later, you're looking for that snack, and that snack is where most people actually maintain their excess weight. And so now you do this, a little Guar Gum before your dinner, and you don't need that snack, and you don't need that bedtime snack because you're going to feel satisfied. And so the Guar Gum fiber alone, or in combination with protein, showed significant effects for satiety, right? Feeling like you've had enough to eat. Another one is, and I'm getting somewhere with this, believe me, I'm not just kind of randomly throwing these things out there. Alpha-linolenic acid, so flax seeds. We all know flax seeds have been touted for a lot of their health qualities. They create a form of alpha-linolenic acid, which are really good sources of omega-3 fatty acids and fiber. So this is the highest form, alpha-linolenic acid, of omega-3 fatty acids that are not from animal sources. Okay? Alpha lipoic acid, which has often been called the master antioxidant, Now, there are a few things that have been called the master antioxidant, but this is certainly one of them. This is one of the things I use for nerve rebuilding, for neuropathy, etc. It's a very powerful antioxidant. It really has a great effect on blood sugar and blood sugar metabolism. And here we're looking at the recent studies that show ALA's ability, that's alpha lipoic acid, and how it works. And I'm not going to go into AMPK, activated protein kinase. That'd be way too much for now, but it does help regulate insulin. And it's kind of a cellular fuel sensor. I like that term, to upregulate activity in peripheral skeletal muscle. This is one of the reasons why exercise is so critical, and particularly high intensity exercise is so critical, because when you exercise the large muscles to fatigue, that can be only as little as twice a week, but you exercise them to fatigue, takes about 20 minutes twice a day. I mean, sorry, twice a week. It activates the peripheral skeletal muscle, and those muscles start begging for sugar. And so there are receptors called GLUT4 receptors that come to the surface of the cell and suck the sugar into the skeletal muscle and burn it for fuel, which gets it out of your bloodstream, so you don't have high blood sugars in your bloodstream, but also then those blood sugars don't get converted to fats. So that's why that high intensity training is so important. And it also reduces appetite, also increases insulin stimulating glucose disposal, both in the whole body and in skeletal muscle. And so it showed that ALA supports cellular sensitivity to insulin by 27%. So anybody that is pre-diabetic that lowers insulin sensitivity by 27% will stop being pre-diabetic, right? It's pretty much guaranteed. So here you've got some really, really simple things to do. And one study showed that a dose of 600 milligrams per day of ALA over 3 months led to a 36% reduction in blood fats. That is stunning. When our book comes out, we just got the cover back today, cover design, so we're getting really, really close. But when our book comes out and you look at it, you'll see how much of an increased longevity or decreased mortality there is if you can lower your blood fats by 36%, and if you can reduce oxidative stress by 38%. It's astonishing what you do. Now, so far, this is a lot of work, though. I mean, you have to sit down and take dozens of pills. Oh, no, you're not. And so I mentioned the GLUT4 receptors. Those are glucose receptors. It increases GLUT4 stimulated glucose transport, independent of insulin, which lowers oxidative stress and increased nerve conductivity. And that's probably why alpha lipoic acid, they're both ALA, by the way. That's why alpha lipoic acid has such a powerful activity on nerve cells. I use that with one other supplement, just 2 things, and we get tremendous results on neuropathy, whether it's diabetic, B12 deficiency, etc. Big, big difference. So next, we've got chromium. So this is critical for glucose intake into the cells again. 1,000 micrograms a day of chromium showed a significant improvement in markers of blood sugar balance, again, increased cellular sensitivity to insulin, and lowered blood fats again. In a study of 43 patients, that were doing 600 micrograms of chromium. That's a tiny, tiny dose, by the way, and 2 milligrams of biotin a day, or placebo. There was a much better response in the actual chromium and biotin group. Next up is vanadyl sulfate. Again, we're stimulating glucose uptake within the cells. That's really the key. We got to get the sugar into the cells so the cells can burn it. okay, for fuel and get it out of your bloodstream. And with insulin resistance, then it's very hard to get the glucose into the cells. Again, we're increasing GLUT4 synthesis, which is a glucose transport protein, allows glucose to enter the cell. And now we have increased muscle cell sensitivity to insulin. Now, the other thing this does, particularly if you're just doing a minimal amount of exercise, again, 40 minutes a week, and you're doing these substances, well, what do you think happens if you get more blood sugar into the skeletal muscle? Yeah, right. You're going to get more development. So it's really a multi-edged sword. Just by doing these simple things, you're actually helping everything. Again, the 100 milligrams a day, again, tiny dose of vanadyl sulfate was shown to support insulin sensitivity, right, by testing fasting glucose and hemoglobin A1C. And a 3-week study, very short study, 100 milligrams a day significantly improved liver and peripheral muscle sensitivity in people with elevated blood sugar levels, but still within the normal range, okay? For example, hemoglobin A1C, if you get a hemoglobin A1C over 5.6, you are called pre-diabetic. If it gets over 6.4, you're called diabetic. But the sweet spot for hemoglobin A1C is 5.0 to 5.2, and 5.3 is very close. So we'll say 5.0 to 5.3. Once you get above 5.3, even though you're in the so-called normal range, right? Still in the normal range, you still increase mortality. And so the vanadyl sulfate is going to help with that. All these supplements are going to provide a lot of glucose and weight loss support. But, I know a lot of my patients don't like taking a bunch of pills every day. I don't really enjoy it at all. In fact, I often don't take the pills that I really would benefit me because I get busy or I'm lazy or whatever it is. I just don't like swallowing all those pills. Those of you that were listening to me when I was doing the radio show, The Medicine Men with Dave Stouter, well, Dave would come in and he had the little pill boxes, would pour 70 pills out on the desk, and he would eat them during the hour that we were on the radio. I couldn't believe it. Now, here's the gig. We just recently started carrying a product called Glycemicor, which is from one of the best research nutritional companies on the planet. These people really, really, really do their research. And they've come up with a product called Glycemicor that, not coincidentally, has everything in it that we just talked about it. And if you do this particularly as your first meal of the day, you just put it in a shake. It tastes fine. Some people like the chocolate. I tend to like the vanilla a little bit better, but it's very simple. And you can put other things in there if you want, in pretty much anything you want. And you're going to get all the value of the things I just talked about. Now, those of you that have been watching me for a while know I rarely pitch one of my products, right? But this one is just too good to pass up. It's really, really, really very powerful. Now, so in terms of weight, right? It's not the only factor. It's just the easiest one and one that'll be very beneficial. Now, so I talked about Glucomannan and Guar Gum. Any fiber, I think, almost any fiber is going to help. Partially because it's going to rebalance your microbiome, right? The microbes in your gut. Now, most of you have heard about SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. Well, the small intestine does not have a huge bacterial load. The biggest load of bacteria and probiotics is actually in the large intestine. However, the fiber will go through the small intestine undigested and will get down and become partially a prebiotic for your microbiome and for that bacteria. A couple of other things you can do for weight loss that are really painless, okay? Really painless is, if you haven't already, go ahead and check out resistant starches. Resistant starches. And resistant starches are starches, carbohydrates, complex carbohydrates, that are resistant to digestion. So one of the more common ones that occurs naturally is green banana, but most of us don't eat a lot of that. Oats are also very, very good. And so what these do, they are not well and easily broken down in the intestine, small intestine, and they get down to the large intestine again to feed the bacteria. But you can make your own resistant starch really easily. Last night, I baked 8 potatoes, put them in the refrigerator. Now, when I go take those potatoes out, they are resistant starch, mostly resistant starch. What that means is they don't get digested in my small intestine, a little bit, but most of it doesn't get digested in my small intestine, and then where it would create sugars, and I would then absorb the sugars, and it would shoot my blood sugars up. But most of the resistant starch doesn't really break down until it gets down into your large intestine, where it feeds your beneficial microbiome. So you can do that with potatoes. Just, bake a bunch of potatoes, or however you like potatoes, cook them, refrigerate them or freeze them, and then take them out and either eat them cold or you can warm them up. And they still contain a lot of resistant starch, even if you heat them up. You can do the same thing with rice. A lot of people that are really looking at resistant starches will heat up a bunch of rice or cook a bunch of rice early in the week, and then they'll take a little bit out every day and heat that up out of the refrigerator and heat that up, and it's a resistant starch. Foods that naturally have a fair amount of resistant starch, I mentioned oats, legumes, beans, pinto beans, black beans, lentils, all have a fair amount of resistant starch. And one of the things that happens then when these products, particularly oats, has been studied a lot, they will get into the intestine, they get broken down into short chain fatty acids. So any of you that have read about bulletproof coffee or any of the bulletproof information will know about short chain fatty acids. And one of those, butyrate, is one of the most healing fatty acids, or actually one of the most healing chemicals for the lining of your intestines. And so it's very effective at lowering SIBO and also healing your gut. Pretty cool. Also, the butyrate lowers colon cancer risk. So do some glycemic core, or those other things we mentioned. Eat more resistant starch. Eat more fiber, lots of vegetables, but more fiber. Avoid wheat. Again, the amylopectin levels in wheat make it just instantly turn to sugar, basically, when it gets into your small intestine, and will really pump up your blood sugar levels. There are lots of other problems they have. They cause wheat causes leaky gut, causes zonulin release, etc. So no wheat, glycemic core, or those supplements together, resistant starch. Have your thyroid checked. I personally think that everybody should get a complete thyroid cascade at least every 5 years. If you're feeling funky, then do it more often, but you should every 5 years. So that's TSH, T4 or free T4, T3 or T3, or all of them. You want to test at least once for thyroid peroxidase antibodies and antithyroglobulin antibodies. And if you're under a lot of stress, you need to test for reverse T3, which is what the body presents or produces as a method of slowing down your metabolism. And then the last one is stress. Okay. Now, here's my recommendation. Before you eat, 15, 20 minutes before, do 2 ounces of apple cider vinegar. I don't believe that the gummies are as good. I would prefer the liquid apple cider vinegar. If you have GERD or acid problems, you might have to skip that step. You can put it in water, so it's not straight apple cider vinegar. That will lower significantly your post-meal or postprandial blood sugar levels. Then do glycemic at least once a day to get all the benefits that we looked at earlier, and then do some resistant starch. Piece of cake. None of these things are difficult. And get to the gym a couple times a week, 20 minutes at a time. That should be enough. All right. So this is an easy weight loss or defeat diabetes program as you're probably ever going to see. All right. Any questions?
We do.
Okay.
How long would you refrigerate the potatoes or rice to make them more resistant to starch?
Even overnight is very effective. If you freeze them or leave them in for a couple days, well, freezing in particular makes it even more resistant. And to be honest, I don't know what happens there biochemically, but the studies are pretty clear.
And then brown rice and red potatoes, are those better?
The potato, you could pick any. Red is a touch better. I would say mix them up, do some of each. They're all good. And brown rice will then have more fiber and more nutritious and in terms of vitamins and minerals. So I would prefer that. But the resistant starch will form either from the white or brown rice. But try black rice. They sometimes call it wild rice or emperor's rice. In China, only the imperial court was allowed to eat the wild rice or the black rice, and it's really nutritious.
Oh, is stevia okay?
Yeah, stevia is fine. They're finding more and more health benefits of stevia. It actually has been shown to have some beneficial effect against retroviruses. And so I personally use stevia, not every day, but I use it relatively often. We are all infected with massive numbers of retroviruses. Typically, the typical person, 8% of their genetic structure is retroviruses that we've inherited from our ancestors. And we have to be our body has to be on constant guard to protect us from those. Plus, most vaccines are loaded with retroviruses because they're not tested for it. It's very hard to test. There are very few labs that test for it. So just assume that you've got lots of retroviruses running around, and stevia has been shown to be beneficial for that. Monk fruit sweetener, I also think is very good. Actually, a little honey if it's unheated, local honey can actually be beneficial. So those are the 3 sweeteners I recommend.
Okay. I found some Guar Gum in my cabinet. Yay. How should I prepare it, and how often should I take that?
I have absolutely no idea how to prepare it, because whenever I take it, it's in something already prepared.
Yeah.
But again, if you go to Dr. Google and you put in Guar Gum, they'll have tons. Some people put it in muffins. Some people put it in smoothies. But I don't personally have a good recipe for that.
Yeah, puddings and stuff.
Puddings, yeah, because it's a thickener. It makes them thicker, right? More viscous.
Yeah. They're saying online it says half a teaspoon in water.
Okay, there you go.
There you go. It might even be a good egg substitute for bakery products.
Oh, that's a thought. Okay. Any other questions?
Nope. I think we're good.
Well, you guys are easy on me today. That was a ton of information. Catherine will be putting this up, and feel free to go back and check it out. I mean, there were a couple slides where I did lots and lots of information on. Okay. So use this as kind of a guide today. I think it's one of the more informative discussions we'll do. Was there another comment there?
Oh, excellent information. Thanks a ton. Oh, do you have to be a patient of yours to buy the glycema?
No, we can sell retail. So we can sell that.
What about psyllium fiber?
Psyllium's very good for some things. You have to be a little bit careful with psyllium um, because it doesn't dissolve. And so in people that have dry intestines, right, hard stools, for example, sometimes bulking agents like psyllium can actually make them more constipated, right? You need a stool to pass, but then you need peristaltic action, the stimulation, the pumping of the intestine, and you need enough fluid in the intestines to pass the stool. A lot of times in older people, they don't have enough fluid, and if they do psyllium, it actually just blocks them up more. So if you don't have that problem, psyllium's great. Not my favorite, but great. All those fibers are good.
Yeah, you can tolerate it.
Flax, fabulous. Chia, love it.
Yeah, chia pudding. Okay.
All right. Hey, thank you, thank you, thank you, and thank you for the kind comments. I really appreciate it. I love doing this, and several of you have sent some great questions. We will get to those, and thank you again. Be happy, be healthy, and we'll see you next Thursday. Bye-bye.